Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, yWhales, wherever in the world you are. So, as always, it's an ever evolving asset class, and as we move through Web3, we see quite a bit of crypto projects, NFT projects, utility projects, DAO projects. There's so much going on, and so we just combined it all into a single person here with Ryan. Ryan is got a very storied background. There's without us like literally reading through his LinkedIn page, you've been in the space really since early days. I'll give you OG status because you've clearly earned it. And so really, this is going to be a fabulous interview. I've got, as always, Kat Cohen from the Krillist here today. Because anytime there's NFTs, like I've got to bow out and say, like, I understand the utility, I understand the technology, the artwork is just like goes right over my head. So thank you, Kat, for hopping on. But Ryan, if you don't mind giving us kind of the audience who may have not had exposure to you yet, a little bit of your background, and then we'll dive into a couple of your latest projects.
Sure. So my name is Ryan Zurrer. Uh, I have been in crypto since sort of late 2012, early 2013. Started mostly because I was running a Brazilian renewables company, and I started using Bitcoin as rails to send money home because I was getting skinned on remittance fees, sending money out of Brazil. And that kind of, you take the metaphorical trip down the Bitcoin rabbit hole, and everybody has the same story of like getting lost and being up till 3 a.m. and their wife telling them that if they speak about Bitcoin at the dinner table again, they're they're going to be put in the corner. Um, uh, and so that became a passion of mine throughout most of the 2010s. Moved from the Bitcoin community largely to the Ethereum community in 2014 because I just found that to be a much more intellectually engaging uh, uh, conversation and community at that time. And so was lucky enough to participate in that first funding moment and a lot of other first funding moments of protocols and projects along the way. I think I was the first person to give the MakerDAO guys money, which were, some of them were kids at that time, and then came into Polychain Capital after the sort of initial a couple months of that project, and leaned into creating the SAFT. And then we did, obviously the most SAFs in the world. And as those projects went live, Filecoin, Definity, Polkadot, um, Avalanche, wrote a seed SAFT into Solana and Near and um, uh, many other projects in the space. And that was a really interesting cycle overall, both the mining cycle and the ICO cycle. Super grateful to be able to have sat at the eye of the storm of those, and also very grateful this time around to be again, center stage doing NFTs and Plater and gaming. So we're very early in Sky Mavis, which is Axie Infinity, Yield Guild, Forgotten Runes Wizard Cult. We've got a great gaming portfolio. And then obviously art became this thing that I became very inspired by. The story, the two stories that have most inspired me throughout all of this time in crypto happened in this cycle, which is that story of people in the Philippines replacing their job that they had lost during COVID with playing this game and making like $50 a day, which by the way, doesn't move the needle for you and I, but is a rich person's salary in the Philippines, right? And really
Huge,
changed their
huge deal.
lives. Like that changed entire cities. So incredibly inspiring story. And then the other one of this sort of like rags to riches of digital artists who for many generations have not found their place in our canon and the rightful place in art canon, and have had difficulty commercializing their work because it's digital and could be replicated infinitely, and you can't even prove like provenance or scarcity of the asset. And so that point of digital scarcity for artists became a really interesting and inspiring story. As you saw artists go from literally like having to do design jobs to pay the bills and so on and so forth to finding financial and artistic freedom overnight. And that was a really incredible story this time around. And so these investments that I've been making as of late have been through my family office. It is a bespoke crypto wealth family office specifically designed for people who've made generational wealth through cryptocurrencies, which presents a unique set of challenges and opportunities. And so That's me.
Yeah, no. So Ryan, I got a couple points I want to jump in on there, and two main ones. I want to come back to kind of the family office thing because I that's a really important point that most people miss. But jumping back to like you rattled off, like some of the top 50, top 30, maybe even top 20 projects, over the last few years and in the last few cycles. Just talk about how much garbage you had to go through to find those.
So one thing I would say is that the hit rate in crypto is higher than general venture because the path to liquidity is shorter, right? So you have some projects that can hit a cycle, and you can, because you have liquidity faster, you can take a better risk adjusted approach to early stage investing, right? And so you can take principal off the table, and like if that experiment doesn't roll out, that's totally fine. You can play like the portfolio construction on in crypto implies that you actually have a higher hit ratio than normal venture. So you do see a lot of garbage, but at the same time, over time you get the filtration mechanisms right, and most of my day is spent with really interesting people building really interesting things that I'm super inspired by.
That's amazing. And then circling around to like family office. A family office is not a new concept. In fact, there's, entire networks of family offices. There's entire businesses and industries related to servicing family offices. But
Yep.
you said a point earlier, which is like, this is different. And
Mm-hmm.
and I like to make that point quite often is that Web3 and everything that kind of surrounds it is a very different asset class than Web2, Web1 or anything else. And
Mm-hmm.
there's a few variances that I believe in, and you can validate me or challenge me on. And number one is the time. For every day in the stock market, it's 4.5 days in crypto. So the speed of
We
innovation,
live in
as you
dog
said,
years, right?
yeah,
We live
is
in dog
so much
years.
faster.
Yeah.
And the custody and the reliance on this is so much more internal than external. Like that's great that you have a bank, but the bank isn't going to touch your assets. So you have to self custody these. So can you talk about some of the challenges that you guys have solved through this?
Well, I mean, there's a whole range of challenges for people. There's often the challenge of if somebody has really significant generational, decabillionaire wealth, but it's all in one extremely volatile asset, how, how you handle a diversification program and how you stick to it. And often that's a challenging conversation for founders who believe so much in what they're doing. Um, but then there are other sort of pragmatic challenges that also become opportunities. So if you can get world class security, which we've invested really heavily in this, and be able to execute on chain transactions in weight with like great security on chain, and so your all of your stuff is not like off chain, and you can put your assets as more productive in this way. The opportunities are really really compelling.
It's an entirely different way to look at investing, though. I mean, as
For
you
sure.
very well know, I mean, um, there's a number of people who say they're fund managers, but the
Yeah,
knowledge base that's
we
needed
saw
truly.
we saw now everybody, as the tide went out, we saw who was swimming without shorts, right?
Yeah, well, yeah. Holy cow! It turns out that those 10,000 plus percentage points that they were saying was increases was just leverage that they were doing. So I mean, it
Mhm,
really it's to do this responsibly. I think you've done well, but over a long period of time, over many boom and bust cycles to to
mhm.
to stay where you're at, and that takes a real amount of diligence, research, and honestly just education of which there's no one that can teach you other than yourself.
Um,
Well, I mean, I think just internalizing lessons learned along the way. Like what happened in this cycle, for example, were lessons learned that most OGs already knew a long time ago. Synerage models, which are like algo stable coins, under collateralization tools, uh, will suffer black swan eventually. There are no exceptions, and we've seen it right over and over again.
Yep.
Ohm and empty set dollar and basis cash and obviously the big one with Luna Terra. Uh, that's a rule that like most most people that I know, especially from like the early MakerDAO days, we knew that to be the case. Never trade with leverage. Um, Trading a high beta asset with leverage is like it was funny. My a friend of mine who's been in the game with me for almost this entire decade said, "You know what? I don't even know where to go to find leverage to trade. Like, it's not even something that would like ever pass through my mind as a thing to do in weight from centralized entities." And uh, yeah, trading like risk on crypto assets with leverage is like, it's just Russian roulette, right? And the third thing that I mentioned before, that we just are constantly pounding into our member families and our employees on the way up: stick to the diversification plan. Make a percentage or a number for each month, and stick to that no matter what. On the entire way up, you'll be so glad. You have no idea the number of families that have reached out in the last couple of weeks and been like, "Bro, like we ride for life, right? Like, thank you so much, right?" So yeah,
Yeah,
I mean, those are three rules that
Bitcoin
are,
to, crypto and Bitcoin to the moon isn't always a straight path.
no, for sure.
And while we like to think that that rocket ship is going right there, I mean, even Elon had a number of explosions to to get to consistency.
Mhm.
And so, while someday I think we all hope to see the stabilization of this asset class, and
Yeah.
less of the 90% up and down swings that can happen in a 24 period. It's fun and it's exciting, but we need to have that stability. And right now, clearly, as you said, the tide rolls out. It's like, wow, there was a lot of people that truly like, there was a lot more exposure than I think a lot of people had. And watching Three Arrows get liquidated, I mean, it's just like, it's almost heartbreaking, because you wanted to look up to
Yeah.
these guys. You
No,
wanted
because
to
I mean,
say they were doing it
Suzu's
right.
smart. I like Suzu, and we've met a bunch of times over the years, and he's a smart guy. And so, um, uh, yeah, it's a tough one to see.
Yep. Yep.
And wish him the
Lots of
best.
lessons learned that I hope can continue to flow forward. So talk a little bit. I'd love to talk a little bit more about what you guys are doing, because you're not just doing traditional an approach. Like, you're kind of combining, a little bit of AI, there's a lot of machine learning, that kind of stuff going in. So I'd love to kind of dive into there, and then Kat, feel free to jump in as you like.
Yeah, I want to talk about Christie's and maps, but let's go through this first.
Okay, sure. Uh, so very quickly, we've separated out the different uh, risk profiles and return profiles within crypto to be coherent in themselves, and then member families have some optionality, or we have just a pre-prescribed base, like a top end basis, and each one is named after a Swiss watch complication that has kind of a
Mhm.
metaphor of what it is. So. Uh, the first is resonance, which is a very synergistic and highly experimental watch complication. That's the early stage venture stuff. That's the play to earn gaming. That's some of the early stage NFTs. So Yield Guild, Axie, Super Rare, things like that. And that is separated out from the mature token portfolio of like Bitcoin and ETH and mature layer ones and sort of large cap blue chip
I'm
DeFi.
not laughing at using the word mature.
Well,
for
more mature
More
than
mature,
SaaS,
yes.
right? Than like seed stage things, obviously, right? Things that have been over $1 billion for at least 6 months, have $100 million of trading activity per day, this sort of thing, and because those return profiles are very different, right? The return profile of yield and the return profile of Bitcoin are different. So why would you put those together? Because
Mhm.
most crypto funds, as they get scale, eventually just become a Bitcoin beta fund. Because if they're holding most of their liquidity in Bitcoin, it doesn't matter what you do with these small SAFs. Like, you could have 100x and Bitcoin goes down $1,000, and your fund is actually down, right? And
Yep.
so you have to separate these things out, and early stage venture should be capital constrained. The right size, and I think we've seen this with USV as well as many others over the years, is the right size of an early stage venture fund is kind of 150 to, yeah, really over 150. It's starting to be a full house, 250 tops kind of thing.
Yep.
Whereas a Bitcoin fund, you can scale, right? And then you can yield on that. And if you are applying, yielding on the risk assets that that you're into, that helps with compounding over time. And if you're playing multiple cycles, that should deliver superior returns. But the third thing is really the special sauce. So chronograph is market neutral yielding using a mixture of DeFi um, and MEV and delta neutral strategies, where we stack them so that they have superior yield. And I think we're probably producing some of the feedback that we get is we're producing some of the strongest DeFi yields on the planet,
Wow.
and that vehicle is very, very interesting. again, though, it has to be capital constrained, right? You can't like put $5 million into this, right? And MEV as well, like it's not, it's so capital efficient that you don't need to scale it with capital. It doesn't scale linearly with capital. So it's about sort of a capital constraint, um, where you can produce superior returns if you're disciplined about the size of capital that you have.
That's very interesting. A couple questions
Fascinating.
around there. What's the size of your team that's managing this?
24.
Okay, that's a healthy sized
Big
team
team.
managing.
It's a
Yeah,
big team. It's like 24-hour coverage and data science and multiple devs. We certainly have. I would guess that we have the most devs of any family office on the planet. I'd be surprised if another family office has
Where did
it.
you find your devs? Like where did you source your
he'll never
people?
tell you the secrets.
No, I'll actually tell you. So Dean, my co-founder, is this like celebrity uh, character among devs in the space, and he deserves all the acclaim that he gets. He's been known for calling out bullshit uh, way before anybody else saw it, and it coming true in the end many times. And you can look at that, but also just being a funny, irreverent, extraordinarily talented developer who talks the talk, but also shows up in weight. And so he's actually brought quite a number into the fold, and it's grown organically over time. Our culture is really special, and we love being around each other. And so, yeah,
You know,
that creates its own pull.
yeah, one of the things I really want to point out, for anyone that's listening, is what Ryan's also describing is a very large view of the space. And traditionally, I talk to VCs all around the world every single day, and I talk to a lot of project managers and whatnot. And Ryan, I like the way that you're putting things into buckets. And while they're all connected in a certain way, you didn't talk about like, oh, well, here's our real estate over here, and I'm sure you have real estate exposure and all these other
Mm-hmm.
things. But the idea that you take Web3 and then you break it down into various assets class. You've got metaverse, you've got gaming, you've got NFTs, you have cryptocurrencies, and then you're breaking those down even further. Like generally the one of the challenges, I'm not gonna say problem, but one of the challenges that I see that when investors come into the space is they just kind of dive into a very, like a singular point of view. Like the number of Bitcoin funds I see on a weekly basis that are
Maximalism.
starting.
Oh
Yeah,
God,
it's like I can't
don't
I
even get me
can't my
started on maximalism.
yeah. Oh, yeah. No. And generally, they're like the ETH. I can live with the Bitcoin people because they have their own levels of insanity. It's the ETH ones that
The
kind
ETH
of like
maximalism is the worst maximalism because
yeah.
we were born of the disdain of maximalism. I'm like, what is going on, guys? Like, I can't even believe like
And,
we,
and
we,
I
we
listen for all of you before I get more hate mail. Like I love ETH.
oh,
I think it's fabulous. I think there's a lot of really good things it does, but it's not like the chain of the world. Like it can't be. Like there's not otherwise we'd all be still dialing into like Prodigy is like this was the greatest one at all. Like we have
yeah,
to move past this into like a chain agnostic future because there's really cool chains that are being developed, and Ryan, you've invested I think in almost all of them. So clearly there's great use cases and there's a lot of time, and we were far from mainstream. How do you from a perspective, how are you absorbing that amount of intel? Because I do it from this level. I see it from from the communities. I see it from the podcast, the interviews I do, and so I get a lot of insight into kind of like where I see things going and exposure. But where do you
mhm.
find like a really good source of kind of like watching the playing field?
We lean into the youth movement, right? There's a generation of kids that have come up who speak this language natively, right? Like when this started, like nobody had like the computer science, the cryptography, the economics, the governance part to like make a crypto protocol just like top to bottom themselves. And now there's a new young generation that is coming up who speak this language natively, right? Where we live in our 20s and 30s and speak it with an accent, as you would a new language.
Mm-hmm.
And so, um, yeah, we defer to a lot of the great young talents in our team. LA with Forgotten Wizards and our Forgotten Runes Wizard cult, I should say, and Dean with MEV and so many other things. I look, we train young talent really well, and then sort of trust them in a certain way,
That's amazing.
and just take this dialectic approach of taking two sides of a debate and trying to drive towards truth of the matter.
That's
You know
beautiful.
Very serious about that.
what I see at yWhales, my legendary company, my educational consulting company, is um, what I look for is finding that young talent. So one of the things I did last year was write a course on blockchain technology, NFTs, and cryptocurrency for high school kids. I thought it was really important for them to be exposed to this. And still education really hasn't caught up with what's happening in Web3, not only um, at the high school level, but also at the university level. So, my goal is to expose as many kids who I think, can really dive in, can be those developers and inspire them, and have things that they can look at, especially, artwork on the wall, and hey, can they interact with that and get excited? So that's something that's personally really important to me. I've taught my own daughters about it. They both have wallets. They have an NFT collection. They can talk about it, and they're quite young. So I think it's sort of never too early in some ways, and I love that because we really are going to have to push the education system forward because it's pretty stagnant overall. We're not quite there yet. There's still a lot, quote unquote, on paper, and we have to move it forward.
How do you feel about the opportunity to mix play to earn gaming and make it sort of play to learn education, or
What
earn to learn, so to speak?
I think that's amazing. So first of all, I do run a gaming node myself, and I'm in this P2E world, and have been in it as like a little side hustle. I think one of the things I've learned actually just in this conversation since talking to you, one of the good things I've done is I have diversified. I have never leveraged myself. And I'm a hodler and a
And
collector
also
also.
collector. Tell us about the
Yes.
piece you got at the Christie's auction.
Oh my gosh, I'm so excited that I'm really, really feel blessed and happy that I was able to win a piece at the Christie's auction that you curated. It's a Riesinger. I had my eye on that piece. I have another piece of his, but not a one of one. So, and this one I just thought was incredibly special. I was just elated that I was able to get it. And what was wonderful was actually going to Christie's and seeing the entire exhibit of the auction in real life, and getting to experience that. And I've been following this, the digital art space, especially with digitally native artists. And this is
Is that a Refik behind you?
Refik, yeah, it's a 16-minute Refik behind me.
Oh, nice.
For a long time, and that, what you put together, I thought was one of the most thoughtful, comprehensive, and important, really, auctions. And so, tell us a little bit more about it, and also with a great purpose, which I, definitely spoke to me, for maps. And I'd love for you to speak a little bit more about it since it just ended a couple of days ago.
Sure. Yeah, I mean, we're super ecstatic and just so grateful to the artists, to the collectors like yourself, um, to in all the support that they've done to push psychedelic science forward, and help maps, which I think is an amazing social experiment. Right, we've never really seen a nonprofit lead a novel pharmaceuticals category. And this happens to be also in the category that is probably the largest problem that mankind faces, which is the mental health pandemic that we've unleashed onto our society. And I say this having spent a decade in renewables through the 2000s. And I can confidently say that technologically, climate change is solved. It'll take some time to implement the infrastructure, but technologically, it's solved. We'll look back at that in the rear view at some point. But mental health is the biggest problem that mankind faces that doesn't have a resolution right now, and it's a big problem, especially post pandemic. So, I, I mean, when I reached out to the artists, which incidentally are all artists that as I've done the collecting, I've really enjoyed this part of being able to connect directly with artists. In contemporary art, you never connect directly with the artists, but in this new space, you can. And so you know, a lot of the collecting that I've done has been through personal relationships and reaching out and talking with the artists. Mike Winkleman, Beeple, he and I are very close friends. We talk almost every day. We grew up not very far from each other, and his brother, who's a brilliant engineer, is also a close friend of mine. And Refik and all these guys, the personal relationship has been really amazing. And so I reached out to some of them, asking them to do this, thinking that maybe a few would say yes. And the whole group came back saying yes. I was just blown away. And in the end, it makes sense because so many artists have had their artistic journey informed by their psychedelic journey. And in the case of many of the artists in this drop, they cited that their very lives were saved by a psychedelic journey or a MAPS protocol. In the case of some artists, it was actually a MAPS protocol that saved their life. And so in seeing their success and how they were at the brink of one point, and that's what I talked about at the top of like how inspiring that story of digital artists emerging and finding their mechanism of commercialization has been for me. Yeah, to put this together was a lot of work, but a great like labor of love, and shared so many like tearful moments with all these artists as they made, and then they just showed up. Like I was expecting most of them to put like an edition or like because they're giving away this in many cases like 6-figure assets, right? Uh, and they all bawled out. I can't believe how hard they all went on it, and it was just like so touching to be honest with you.
And Ryan, I just want to point out something, and that's I've found this to be the most engaging, accepting asset class and collaborative of any industry I've ever been a part of. I've been doing VC work for 25 plus years. I've been in a variety of different asset classes. Kind of Web3, for all the bad that you hear and all the scams and whatnot, like that's all the fringe, things. Those people aren't part of the community. There there is an amazing amount of collaboration and really thoughtfulness that wants to push this thought forward, the thought that it's not just read and write, but read, write, own. The fact that there's actual ownership, that we're trying to like, for all the wrong and for every bad story, there's 100 amazing things that are happening every day. And hearing you talk about artists which are busy, I mean, and successful artists are extremely busy, to take their time and say, like, mental health is a problem. And I completely wholeheartedly agree with you that it is the current largest pandemic we're facing right now. It's anyone that doesn't believe it, I mean, it's all over the news. They're not saying it.
Yep. Yep. The symptoms are manifesting in ways that we're not connecting the dots yet. But when you connect the dots, the answer is mental health.
Well, I feel left out here because I've never done the psychedelic thing. so I feel like there's like a boot camp I need to go to or something here.
Not a boot camp. You can go to a super gentle a place either in the US or in the jungles if you're so inclined. And the the experience of that, just getting out of your own echo chamber and being able to look at your life sort of removed from your own ego, and sometimes have a laugh at yourself, and sometimes laughter is the best medicine. It's just a great cleansing experience that we in fact we offer as a part of ongoing education. Like, people can take courses, or they can go and take an ayahuasca trip, and that's something that the company covers with open arms.
Wow.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I thought what was really great for me as a collector was to be able to meet the artists in real life who I collect. I mean, that was a huge highlight for me. And I came from collecting legendary art, and moving into collecting digitally native artists. And, the process is just, it's just so much easier. I mean, already, the auction ended 2 days ago. I already paid for and received my piece of art in, instantly, and it just doesn't happen with in the legendary art world, and that
However,
the artists were so.
there is an interesting tax consideration that comes up that you'll come to now next April. But the transfer of these NFTs are having really interesting tax rulings around the world that people are not paying enough attention to, but are probably going to have to pretty soon. But that's maybe a
I've got
discussion for
I've
another
got
day.
a very long, yeah, I'm doing a very big push, Ryan. Any help I can get. I believe that we're going to push for regulation that the 1031 exchange should apply to cryptocurrencies and NFTs. So if you hear it coming around, that's my new thing.
Yeah,
I'm strumming up support for.
you know what? That's why we're in Switzerland, where the regulation is coherent, and we don't worry
And
about
the
that stuff.
and the skiing and the
Yeah,
chocolate are better too.
yeah.
Great. Uh,
Yeah, New York is probably not the best place to be for that. But I hear you about the taxes, because I actually have somebody who literally comes in every week and helps me with every little transaction that happens that goes to my accounting firm, and make sure that I'm on the up and up, and
yep.
paying every little thing I have to pay. But that's okay. Uh, but also, again, I just think that
We've just seen this and unfold in different places, like where there's a physical and a digital. It's like, it's just like intellectually an interesting conversation of like, when do you take possession of it? So like there's a corresponding physical of that Andres Reisinger. Is that when that is sent, or is that when it's sent to your wallet? And the reality is the tax authorities don't know. They don't have an idea of what of a lot of different questions around this space. So it's just an interesting intellectual question that will take some time to unfold.
well, I'm definitely going to follow up with you about the physical
Sure.
that goes with it. I'm very excited about that. But I just think that the auction itself is historic.
Oh, well, thank
The
you.
Yes, it is in so many ways, and we just haven't seen an auction like that with the breadth of truly those digitally native artists in one place. And
Yeah,
I
I'm
don't know all the other collectors, but
one of the lessons that I take away from it is that uh, the crossover, like the Venn diagram between the crypto community and the psychedelics community, has a really strong overlap. And um, I think there will be other ways of those two communities to support each other. I've been thinking around some as we continue to evolve MAPS funding, but want to ensure that they stay nonprofit. Because if we make them for profit, then it's just going to bend towards the arc of capitalism and pharma profit maximization. And like we should try this one social experiment where we don't do that. And so how we continue to fund them I think we'll probably have an increasingly crypto native format over time. I'm very excited about the possibility of tokenizing cash flows over time. I'm very excited that this next cycle, tokens will be valued based on their cash flows, which I'm
Yep.
like, finally, been waiting for this for so long.
Asset backed tokens. I fully agree.
Right. Some of these things throw off compelling cash flows. Like, for example, super rare against its current value throws off great cash flows. Right. Um, and they'll be evaluated like businesses that throw off cash flows, and it'll be the best era because it'll be
Yeah.
and
coherent.
even in this bear market, you saw that the sale did really well. I wanted you to comment on that, because I think that's also important.
Well, I think there's some interesting lessons there. When all of the artists said yes, and back in sort of February, March, uh, I confess I would have projected higher than what we had today. But if you take the ETH price written down, if you just index for the ETH price back to then, it actually would have raised somewhere around 6 million, which I would have been in tears if it had raised 6 million. And so when I think about it on a relative basis, you know, like sometimes it doesn't matter what you do on the micro if the macro goes against you, but it doesn't mean that you can give up your duty. You still, like, duty calls, and you got to answer the bell, and you got to do the right thing independent of the macro conditions. And so we launched into a bloodbath, but we did, I think, great, all things considered, and I'm super proud of it at this point.
Yeah, so I want to swing back over to play to earn, play to live,
Mm-hmm.
while we got you.
Play to learn. I love
Play to
that.
learn.
Like the
Yep.
gamification of life.
Definitely the
How about
future.
that?
With financial incentives, right?
Correct.
Like
Yes.
that's the
You obviously know Gabby much better than I do. I was fortunate enough to interview Gabby last year on this podcast, and he
Mhm.
really did open my eyes to go to. This isn't about, we're in first world countries, like we're all beyond blessed in ways that we can't even imagine. The idea around, somebody being able to come out of the sweatshops, out of the rice paddies, out of the mud pits and the diamond mines and all these
Mhm.
these horrible things, and sit on the sideline with a very cheap, Android device anywhere in the world. And when we think about VR and all this head stuff, these people don't have access to that. Like the access to a 4-year-old Android device is about what they're going to get, and some very rudimentary Wi-Fi, or if they're lucky. The idea that they can create value, just sitting there and playing, which a lot of them are doing anyway without any value. And then take that, and they're learning DeFi. They're learning, how to manage themselves and how to manage others in these guilds and these different layers. It entirely changed like my perception on the play. There's a lot of nascent views on this. I came away going, this is the future. This is how you bring an entire generation out of poverty, is
Mhm.
by leveling the playing field and shrinking the globe.
Yep.
And I think that's one of the things that Web3 does best, is it eliminates borders. It's just gone. Like
Like
you're all in the same playing field.
who would have thought that video games would be the path in which we would realize UBI, right?
Yeah,
Universal basic income.
yeah,
Who would have thunk,
Yes.
right? We definitely live in a simulation or the future, right?
yeah.
Yes.
uh,
And it starts with the kids,
well,
right?
and this is the thing is like it's a lot of the successes in with Axie were young kids that then parlayed it into a lot into other things in the space and self-organized and have these DAOs, and we're in dozens, if not 100 DAOs supporting this whole ecosystem. And it's um, it's interesting. We thought in the early days of crypto that it would be emerging market countries that would find product market fit more than say traditional countries, let's say. And you kind of forgot about that along the way, but here it's sort of playing itself out, and you're like, oh yeah, like we knew all along that it would be actually like emergent countries that would find product market fit beyond the speculative use case, right? And that's really what was special for me, is that this is the first time. Like, yes, now they are also speculating, but the core of it was not speculation. It's contributing resources and getting a financial incentivization mechanism that is fair and just and is flexible over time, that pays a reasonable wage for the resources allocated to the network, and that's super compelling, I think.
And it allows them to self-govern in a lot of
Yep.
ways. You can form DAOs inside DAOs inside DAOs, and really give so much power back. Which is yWhales' core theses, which is communities will truly run the world.
Yeah.
The
Although there
the
is one thing about DAOs that I would mention here, is that from the first DAO until the most recent DAOs, and I was in that first DAO, and I've been in a lot since. There is this tragedy of the commons that commonly exists, where somebody like buys one share and then comes in and the sort of loudest voice wins, or people are not working for a salary or what have you. And DAOs need to be obviated away from the actual operation. And so this DAO guild model that we talk about a lot internally, and also jammed on in the early days of Yield Guild with Gabby, is the right play, so that DAOs are obviated away from the operational day to day. At the end of the day, they're going to be companies, and they're probably going to be regulated like companies. So just treat them like companies.
Have you seen the yWhales pitch, Ryan? I really appreciate you kind of giving a primer for
I
for
have not. Sorry.
yWhales.
Sorry.
No, I absolutely will. We'll talk later. But
Cool.
I completely agree with you. And the idea around communities, which is something you guys have invested in, you're supporting, and you're growing, with YGG and Lava Labs and everything else. The idea that suddenly your identity is no longer based on your physical being. It's also your online identity. And right now, there's no such thing. There's no such thing as a unified online identity. You have your Facebook page, you've got your, your LinkedIn, you've got a variety of things that it's scattered about all over the place, but there's nothing that unifies it. And most importantly, you don't own it. It's not yours. So, the idea is, and I'd love to hear kind of what you guys have been seeing and looking at in this space around like online
Yep.
ownership of identity.
Yep. Well, generally, I mean, I think core thesis in the venture book is that there is this millimeter of space that exists between the metaverse and your real world identity. And that relationship of you reconciling your digital identity with your physical identity is going to become an incredibly valuable bridge and set of bridges, really a large array of bridges.
Yep.
And so we think a lot about that. That was a lot of the thesis around Human One, that it invokes this conversation about mankind's first steps into the metaverse. It's something that we think about really deeply in the gaming, where, and this came from my son, where, if I offered him to buy him like a pair of Nikes in Fortnite or a pair of Nikes in the real world, he'd take the Fortnite Nikes, right? That's where they go to be with their friends. That is their social network. And the interesting thing is with crypto assets over time, those Nikes, not in the case of Fortnite, but in future games, he'll be able to resell those Nikes after he uses them for a period of time, right? So actually the economically optimal play is his decision, not the real world Nikes, which we'd have to throw out after a period of time. And so that, thinking about like different forms of digital scarcity in this way, and how they'll unfold and how they'll be valued for purposes of sometimes display, which I would argue that is a lot of what drives, say, PFPs, is sort of social status and social inclusion in a club, or whether it's being able to have cool skins with your friends, or land that you actually build on and play on. All these things, all these digital assets, now that there's digital scarcity through crypto assets, will have values ascribed to them, and will have productive markets. Like, we'll make more on like Axie Infinity land than people make renting, apartments in New York, right? Like, on a certain scale.
Yeah, one of the things when I give a master class to adults on blockchain technology, NFTs, metaverse, talking about this, and one of the big surprises that they learn is that this, a one of a kind Gucci bag sold for $4,000 more than the actual one of a kind Gucci bag in real life in Roblox. And so why did that happen? It's because that bag will be sold down the blockchain. It will be in perfect condition. And when I talk to women, it's like, okay, well, if you do have a handbag, it's inevitably going to get, there's the lipstick that's going to come out. You can try to resell it on the real. And the reality is that you're not going to use that bag every day, right? But if it's in your closet in the metaverse where everyone can see your actual whole wardrobe and what you own, it's going to be
social
seen
flex,
even
right?
more, right? The social
It's a
flex.
social flex. These are social flexes, which pan culture happens. All cultures, there's a certain resonance with being able to flex socially. This is kind of like baked into our sort of lizard brains, and so it makes sense that that these will exist, right, and also be valuable. Like, I have been trying to get some major watchmakers to do an iPhone, like a fine iPhone watch, because eventually this space will become an NFT. Apple will wake up, do something similar to Twitter, and you'll be able to have an NFT on your phone, and like a fine watchmaker will then be able to do an NFT as a watch on the space that a new generation usually looks at time, right, and be able to bridge their brand into the future in this way, right? Like a Patek or an AP doing an iPhone watch. I actually told a company that I'll keep private that if they did it, they'd be able to sell it for the same price that they sell the actual watches, right?
And that's the thing, is the hardware is like, you're not going to beat Apple on hardware, so just stop. But I think the idea, you're exactly correct, is like there's a digital ownership. There's, whether you call it artificial scarcity or just the fact that it's like, look, this is what we want to do. We want it to be mainstream, but we also want it to be exclusive. I think says a lot, and it's true. We all have watches and cars and things, and these are heavy assets that degrade sometimes over time, one way or the other. They may increase in value, but they're heavy assets. The idea that you have these lightweight assets that have immediately liquidity, which is something you talked about earlier, is just such a game changer. That it's still going to take some time for the mainstream to understand. Like the wallet situation is horrendous. I talk about it constantly. I hope somebody fixes it soon, because that's the point of which will allow us to come online. Apple's working on it. Everybody's working on it.
Mobile or web, you mean? Like crypto wallet?
Yeah. And just
Crypto
holding
wallet
your
mobile?
assets, manage. Yeah.
It's interesting.
I mean, mobile, it's got to be mobile.
So a funny thing is, most OGs in the game I know don't, by design, don't use mobile with crypto.
I would never use mobile
not.
today.
You don't.
I would not touch mobile today.
It's a strange thing. This is a strange
But it
part
needs to
of
be.
crypto, right?
Yeah.
I don't have my MetaMask, anything on my cell phone.
Will come
Nothing.
unquestionably, and it has to, for the play to earn gaming cohort.
Yep.
But I just offer the data point without judgment that most people who evolve in crypto over time evolve to the web version, which is probably just a symptom that we haven't solved mobile yet, but we have to, for sure.
Yeah, we're still a few minutes away.
We're still early, right?
It's so early. I mean, I equate, like we're arguing over like modem baud rates.
Yeah.
When we're talking about transaction speed, like these are things that no one should ever care about. Like no one should ever be like, oh, you use Amazon S3. Well, I only host on Azure. Like, it's just like the whole layer of which we were building out today needs to disappear, and it needs to be an amazing experience from start to finish. That's why Web 2 is Web 2. It's like, the iPhone was, the mobile version. Like we all had Blackberries, and it's cute and it kind of worked, but it was never mainstream until suddenly that touchscreen and the games and the apps appeared. And we haven't had that in blockchain, I don't believe yet.
So I have a question for you, because you are an OG. When you think about the future and the legacy you want to leave behind, what does that look like?
I'll be completely forgotten and completely irrelevant, and that's fine. And I can laugh at that and just trying to, maximize this, squeeze every bit of the time that we have, and then I'll be forgotten within probably 6 months.
I don't think so. Or what's the legacy? What's legacy you want to leave to your kids, even to your children?
Well, so very truthfully, from a family office perspective, we do a lot of thinking with groups around being intergenerational, and you end up tending towards these mechanisms that have to kind of dole out, but remove governance from like capital spending, so that you don't have like some crazy kid run in and it's like lose 80% of the family's money because they have control or something like that, right? There has to be this mixture of over time, next of kin passing tests and like being financially responsible and competent to like sit on a board along with non-familial members who are professionals and all these things. And there has to be this like stewardship of this that obviates away the fact that not all of your kids may be into the same thing as you. And that means that they shouldn't then be removed by the one kid who is. So their rights have to be protected. Basically, you have to make a human blockchain. That's basically what you end up doing in order to like think about it. Like if you're thinking intergenerationally from like a capital distribution perspective, you kind of have to create this Byzantine fault tolerant system depending on the amount of beneficiaries that you have, and that requires a lot of thinking around familial versus non-familial members and power, because you also don't want like some broke lawyer to be able to co-op everything in like 2 generations or something, right?
Yep. One of the things
think a lot about this,
we did
and then sorry, go ahead.
No, I was going to comment that one of the things that we implemented this past year was writing a course for high school students on financial literacy. Just adding, I look at K-12 schools around the globe, and it's just not a course that's across the globe that kids need to learn, and I think they need to learn. And I started teaching my kids very, very early. And I think at 4, I started teaching them the sort of the earn, spend, save, share model, just the very basics. But I think learning about financial literacy itself is critical. And then especially when you get into, multi-generational wealth and how to pass that on. And it's something that I find that is lacking in our, in the education system, really across the globe, unfortunately. So I'm trying to make a small difference in that way.
That's awesome.
The interesting observation that has come up. I've been doing this thing for a decade, and it has been, any success that I've enjoyed in the 2010s is more due to this process than anything else. In truth, you get this clear snapshot of where you are in a moment of time, and more importantly, you get the opportunity to chalk mistakes up as lessons learned and physically turn the page on that chapter, and so that you can take away what you need, but also let things go. And sometimes people really geek out about the journal and find this really interesting. But again, it's not necessary. It's just sort of like one of these kind of very esoteric things that we do with member families.
I love that.
So
I really think that's amazing. Is
I
that
love that too.
like just a true journal, or are you like locking this into the blockchain as an
No.
Oh, come on, you can degen this.
It's a personal document that somebody makes. It's more, it's very much like, think of it like a financial. It actually started as a sort of a financial report of like all of my consolidated businesses, and then over the years evolved to have like more poems and quantified self and pictures and things like that.
That's amazing.
And just having that once a year snapshot of like where I am realistically, being honest with myself about what went well and what didn't that year, and where I want to go in the next year. I find that putting the things down on paper have this like strange effect of causing them to be realized.
So that's amazing.
Can you give us an example of something you've had to let go and how that felt? What you went through?
So when it started, actually, a good example is how it started. The first year, I got to the end of the year, and I was running some companies in Brazil, and I had angel investment in a bunch of others, and I sort of got to the end of the year, and I said, okay, did I, Ryan Zurrer Inc., actually make money? And then I was also going through a difficult time personally, and sort of had to just get like real about the mistakes that I had made and what I need to do to like, just turn that page. And the process of going through it, again, allows you to to be real with yourself and have that snapshot. And the answer to that question, by the way, that year was no, I did not make money. I worked my tail off all year and didn't make money. But it was good to like have that, right, and be real with yourself about that, so that you can make the alterations that you need to. And then also on the personal side, and over time, the more that I put into the journal, the better my life went overall. It's been a strange process. And now seeing my guys, because it's mandatory at Dialectic, and now seeing them put multiple years together, and how they've matured over time, it's been incredibly heartwarming to bring these young
That's
talents.
fabulous. And in YPO, which is where a lot of us come from, we do monthly. Short, very, very, kind of like, business, personal, family, break it down, what's your numbers, and lots of that stuff. And I've digitally had these going back now almost 9 years. And I just did it the other day, kind of look and kind of see like, where am I progressing? Where are my numbers been? So yours sounds like really fabulous once a year kind of. I love that idea. Ryan, as we kind of head towards close right now, it's the alpha drop time, and you're clearly exposed to a bunch of things. Just one or two projects that again, without financial advice or anything else, just kind of has your brain excited about some of the what people are working on.
I mean, I'll give some high level thematic ones, and then maybe we can dive into a couple of projects that are interesting. So I think in the fourth cycle, we're going to see the emergence of a social network. There's been many instances in the past. Um, I've written some white papers on it in the past. We've not ever seen a successful model emerge, mostly because the models preserve privacy over social discovery, which is a difficult balance to maintain. And then they need to get the financialization layer right, which none of them have really done that properly yet. And so thematically, I think like the big ticket home run alpha is we'll get serious about crypto social in this next cycle. Um, maybe not, but it's certainly a theme that I'm I'm scouting for. Uh, from more of like a here and now point of view, um, we are very excited about some like liquid token opportunities. I think looking at projects from a cash flow perspective, like look at what Curve threw off in cash flows this past week. It's like, right. There are businesses here, right? There are real companies that are throwing off cash, and we're leaning into this pragmatic approach of like, some of these are throwing off like above 50% APY on the buy, like on a PE basis, right?
Yeah, they're actual real companies.
Sure, for sure, right? Like PEs of 0.86 and like 1.4 and stuff like that. And so that's a real interesting like note to lean into. And there's a whole broad set of protocols, and I don't think I need to spoon feed anybody that can go to onto token terminal and figure it out. It's not that difficult. Um, uh, and then overall, I'm extremely excited about how we're carefully designing a a collector pool for really significant um, historical artifacts that you can, like Human One and the Biggie Crown with my collector DAO one of one, and we're then getting very low uh, loan to value debt on those assets and being able to put them into DeFi and yielding opportunities, and then being able to use these capital assets and yield on top of them, and then with the gaming assets, renting them out to Yield Guild and others, and yielding on these NFT assets, and again looking at them as a yield to value ratio, like just standard like Benjamin Graham, you know, margin of security, like very sort of mechanical analysis of stuff that survived through this bear market. I think that's probably, you know, that's probably the most interesting thing to me right
Yeah.
now.
Ryan, you just described something that most people may not understand. It's like you think about, yeah, you can go buy that Ferrari and you can put it in your garage and it can absolutely appreciate in value and you got to take care of it. You got to do the service, do everything else, and it's going to sit for most of the time. The thought that you can take those assets and loan them out with no depreciation, no anything, and manage that in a monetizable way for yourself, the owner, as well as the investors and the users, like it's hard to think about because the game board hasn't really been invented yet. We haven't really
Yeah.
seen the full use of this technology, and I love just hearing your thoughts around kind of where this is going.
Yeah, it's very rudimentary still. It's super laborious for us to do NFT lending on our portfolio, but that's what one of one does. And this actually all started when I bought the dick milking factory from Beeple,
and I chatted because the joke that we're making in the office is that we're going to put the dick to work.
milk and yield, right? And that's exactly what we did. So we got debt on it and put it to work in
As they all
mining,
should.
and you got to put it to work milking that yield. And that it just he loves comedy, right? And so he loved that, and that kind of became its own thing. That but then we sort of woke up and we were like, wait a sec, this is actually interesting. And then the punks and the nouns and the apes and the things that have established floor prices like Beeples or punks or what have you, you can yield on those. You can't. It's actually super tough. We can yield on them, and that's what we do. Uh, um,
but it's not as straightforward as DeFi is. However, it will become so. There's a lot of cool
That,
stuff there, so that's also good. Pawn Finance and NiftyFi and others that are popping up. I think there'll be really interesting opportunities in the crossover between NFTs and DeFi, not NFTs or DeFi. It's the crossover that the magic will happen.
it's
I'm so interested in that.
we can do an
I have all
entire
sorts of things like going off in my head right now.
we can do
about
an
that.
entire hour on that one, Ryan.
I have a quick question
Sure.
actually about one of the things you said about crypto social. Who do you see as an up and comer, if you see an up and comer as a winner in crypto social?
Lens is interesting. I'm going to go out on a limb and say nothing else that I've seen is going to be it from what I've seen. And I may be wrong, and there's some interesting stuff happening like BitCloud and others. But Lens is certainly, I think, the most interesting experiment yet since Akasha, which was the first one. And there's been many, there's been so many in between. And I've always been really excited about this because when creators will be able to monetize directly from their fans, I mean, the incomes for creators are going to become really, really interesting. And then people are going to migrate very quickly. Like it's slowly, then all at once. And as soon as like a Logan Paul or a Jenna Marbles or whoever else finds out how much people are making over on this directly incentivized platform rather than you getting a cut from the advertisers under booking, blah, 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 it'll happen fast. And I thought that maybe Elon would have the opportunity to do that with Twitter, which would be epic. But Google, Microsoft didn't win search. Google didn't win social. Facebook won't win Web3, and these incumbents are probably not the vehicles that will produce the emerging winner. And that's probably a $1 trillion company. That's probably the defining, like that's like a Google venture outcome. And so somebody will get that right. Lens is pretty cool thus far.
Love it. Ryan,
Thank
thank you so much for the time today. Absolutely love it. yWhales, we really appreciate you. Kat, as always, thank you much. Ryan, don't go anywhere. I'm going to hit the stop record, but,
All right.
but don't
Thanks,
hang up.
guys. Thanks for having me on.
Thank you so much. Absolutely. That's Ryan with Dialectic and Kat with the Krillis. Thank you guys so much. We'll see you next time.